Hey everybody, it's Evan Mazza here, back for a new episode of MazzaOnMets, here to recap the series with the Seattle Mariners as we continue to talk all things New York Mets baseball here during the 2025 season. And finally, for the first time in weeks, the Mets have a series win. We seem to be, it is a big accomplishment at this point for the Mets as they spiraled into this 3-14 or so stretch, a stretch that has taken them five and a half or so games out of first place in the National League Eastern Division. Only a game or a game and a half now out of or excuse me, a game and a half ahead of a wild card spot over the Cincinnati Reds. It has been they've been swept by the Guardians, they've been swept by the Padres, they lost two out of three to the Atlanta Braves, and so many of these games were winnable. So many of these games they just flat out blew, so on and so forth. And really, again, it's just been a overall continuation of how bad the Mets have overall played over the past 2 months. And the Mets were able to finally sneak out a series win over the weekend against a good Mariners team after dropping the first game of the series. After dropping the first game of the series in another tough loss, because that was a game where the offense scored 9 runs. But then the next two games, they picked it up with starting pitching, because this is the key to the Mets season. The key to the Mets season is their starting pitching. And on Saturday, we'll talk about it, but on Saturday, they got something out of the starting pitcher. We'll talk a lot about him when we get to that game. And Sunday they got a decent outing again from another starter, and but they also got good offensive production. So we'll begin on Friday with again not having great starting pitching. Sean Manaea started this game against Seattle, and he was hit up a lot. This has been kind of the thing with Sean Manaea so far this year. Now, it's tough to evaluate Sean Manaea this season because Sean's been injured most of the season. Actually, he's still injured now. He's still pitching with a I think they said a bone injury in his arm, so that he's still able to pitch with. But it's certainly tough. It certainly can't be tough to pitch with an injury like that he has. So Sean Manaea is not 100% throughout this whole season. He really hasn't. He really hasn't. So it's tough. It's gonna be tough at the end of the season. It's gonna be tough to evaluate Sean Manaea because of his injuries. But from what we've seen, he's either striking out a lot of guys or he's giving up home runs. He's allowing home runs. That's kind of been his season to this point, and it continued on Friday, where again the strikeouts were there, but there were a lot of he was hit hard a lot, couple home runs. He had 7 strikeouts. He went 5 innings, gave up, struck out seven, but he allowed 4 runs, allowed 2 home runs, and his ERA is now up to 4.78. The Mets paid a lot of money for Sean Manaea. The Mets brought him back, paid him a lot of money, and it's tough to evaluate him. I don't want to throw at the deal and say it was a bad deal already, because again, it was a tough thing because he was out for most of the season, and now he's still pitching with an injury, as we know, in his shoulder. So it's tough to evaluate, but right now they really need Manaea to pitch a lot better than he is. And again, it's a tough ask, but that's what they need right now. In the game, he gave up 2 home runs. He allowed a run in the first, a run in the second, 2 runs in the third, before he pitched 2 shutout innings in the fourth and the fifth. He gave up an RBI double to Julio Rodriguez after he gave up a first inning single to Randy Rosarina. And then in the top of the second, gives up a home run to Mitch Garver. In the top of the third, he gives up a 2-run homer to Kyle Riley right after the Mets gave him the lead. And then he pitched 2 shutout innings after that in the fourth and the fifth. And then he pitched 2 shutout innings in the fourth and the fifth. So again, it's tough to evaluate where Manaea is at this point of the season. You don't know if this is going to be the Manaea you get virtually all season long, but that is pretty much what the Mets are getting out of Manaea. A lot of strikeouts, a lot of hard hit balls, a lot of hard contact, and a lot of home runs. He's already allowed a ton of home runs, and he's only pitched in a couple of starts, not even. So it's again, they need, but regardless, they need more out of Sean Manaea. They really need more out of him because the starting pitching needs it. They need him to be what he was last year. But that was the interest. But that was the tough case when they resigned him because Manaea had never been that good. Manaea had never been that good that he as he was in the second half of last year. He's always been a an average to decent pitcher, but he was never really that. What the Mets got out of him was hopefully they found something, or hopefully Manaea found something. That's why they paid him. But you just hope. But right now he's battling injuries and he's pitching still with an injury. So you just got to hope he gives you just a little bit of something because they could really use in the top of the rotation. But once again, he continues to struggle and he's struggling with the long ball. But the Mets offense came to play on Friday, and that's kind of been a thing that they've been doing over the last couple of games. They've been hitting. But they lost this game. They lost this game 11-9 because their super bullpen didn't come through. I know that's. I know that's. I know Manaea didn't pitch well, but this game to me was on their bullpen. This game to me was on their bullpen. The Mets scored a run in the first, 2 runs in the second, 3 runs in the fourth to give them a lead. And the Mets had that lead until the top of the sixth. So as we go through in the bottom of the first, Lindor hit a home run to tie the game at 1. And then Francisco Alvarez hit an RBI single to tie the game at 2 after Jeff McNeil doubled. And then Francisco Lindor hit an RBI single to make it 3-2 Mets. In the bottom of the fourth, Francisco Lindor hit a second home run of the game to make it 5-4. Soto then followed it up with a home run of his own, his 30th of the season, to make it 6-4. So the Mets are up 6-4 going in to the top of the sixth. Tyler Rogers comes in. And again, this is where Manaea still goes 5. But this is where your Super Bowl, you're up 6-4. This is where your super bullpen, the bullpen you traded 6 or 7 prospects for, needs to come through for you. And on this day, they didn't. Rogers gives up a 1-out single to Donovan Solano. He then on a force out, then after a force out, he gives up a game tying base hit to Cole Young. He then gets Randy Roseanne to ground out, but it's 6-5 now. He didn't have a 1-2-3 inning. 6-5. In the bottom of the seventh, top of the seventh, Ryan Helsley comes in. He gives up a double to Kyle Riley, and then he gives up a game time double to Henio Suarez. All hard hit balls, and then he gives up an RBI single to Dominic Canzone. It's 7-6. He then walks Brooks Raley came into the game. He gave up the base hit to Donovan Canzone to make it 7-6. He then walks Mitch Garver, and then he gives up an RBI double to Donovan Solano, and then Cole Young doubles off of him to make it 10-6. And right there, right there, that's your difference. To me, actually, Frankie Montes then comes in to pitch in the top of the 8th, and he gives up a couple of runs to make it 11-6. Why Frankie Montes is in the game at this point when it's still a 10-6 game, it's still just a 4-run game. I have no idea, but he comes in, he gives up a run, and it's 11-6. Francisco Alvarez tries to get the Mets back into the game with a 3-run homer at the bottom of the 8th, but the Mets go down 1-2-3 in the bottom of the 9th. Really with no effort, really with nothing to show for in the bottom of the 9th. Nobody gets on base. Soto strikes out. Nimmo grounds out. Pete Alonso grounds out. But that ends the inning. Part of the order down by 2 runs, and neither of them gets on base to even give you a chance to tie the game. So, but look, the offense was good. 9 hits, 9 runs, 12 hits. They were good and did a very good job off of Luis Castillo, but did a very good job against Luis Castillo, a good pitcher, but you had Sean Manaea who had to struggle his way through 5 innings. And then the bullpen, Raley, Helsley, and Rogers. Raley's been good all year long. This was really his first real rough outing. Helsley has been a struggle to watch so far, which is not very good at all, not what you wanted when you acquired him. Tyler Rogers hasn't been bad. He's been relatively fine, but he has given up. This was the second game in a row or so where he gave up a big hit, gave up a key run there, or he allowed a key run instead of having a 1-2-3 inning. Remember against Atlanta, The game before, he gave up the game tying base hit, you know. So you got these guys, Rogers and Helsley, and even signing Rayleigh and traded for Soto to get to Gregory Soto to get these big outs in these situations, at this time of year. And once again, they didn't. They didn't come through. And that cost you a game. Shaman I didn't pitch well, so some of it's on him, but I put a lot of this on the bullpen because you had a 6-4 lead. But then, as we've seen throughout this stretch over the past 2 months of New York Mets baseball, the Mets have a bad inning or two. And in this case, it was a 5-run top of the seventh that really just made things harder for the Mets to come back and win the game. They did mount a bit of a comeback with a 3-run homer by Alvarez, but that was it. You know, that was it. So a 5-run seventh inning, that's hard to, again, that's hard for anything. We just started against Atlanta, a 9-run inning, which really did not help anything for the Mets at all. You know, the Mets continue to have these problems with these one innings that just throw the game out of motion for the Mets, and the Mets don't know how to respond to it. It's tough to respond to it, but still, you got to find a way to at least respond to it, and the Mets just don't know how to respond to it. But it's tough when your starting pitching is not going deep, and it's tough when your bullpen is not as strong as you thought it would be, or as you were hoping it would be. And that's been the case with the Mets bullpen over the past week, where they have just not been as strong as you were hoping to be. And Ryan Helsley continues to struggle. So, and they need Helsley, and they need Rogers, and they need Rayleigh, and they need Soto, and they need Diaz to be at the top of their game, because with the way the Mets starting pitching is, not going deep and only giving them at least 5 at best, maybe 6 if you're lucky, they need to be at the top of their game. But that was a game, yes, on Friday, where that to me is on the bullpen, because you were up 6-4 and you had everything all lined up, right? Rogers in the sixth, Helsley or so in the seventh or so innings. Ninth inning, the Diaz, right? Maybe Garrett in the eighth, right? Diaz in the ninth, Diaz in the ninth, whatever. Whatever Carlos Mendoza's mix-up and matchup was going to be for the bullpen, it was still lined up for you with a 2-run lead, and you couldn't even get to the ninth with the lead. Actually, you were down by a bunch or down by 4 runs by the time you came up to the plate in the bottom of the seventh. So, but the Mets did bounce back the next 2 games. They were able to not let this loss spiral into another series loss or another sweep, and bounce back in the next 2 games. And this is where we get to Nolan McLean. Nolan McLean, we can talk. I guess now we can some Met fans are going to ask after watching Saturday, why wasn't he called up sooner? But there was a bit of energy that he added. There was a sense of uh a sense of of electricity that he brought to the fans at Citi Field that Citi Field has not had for a couple of months now. A sense of optimism. I guess that's the best, you know, a sense of optimism. I guess that's the best word too for the season, or for the starting pitching rotation, for to see someone again. He didn't go 6 or 7 innings or anything like that. He went 5, but he struck out 8. He did have those walks, which has been, again, it's been his bugaboo throughout the minor leagues. But, well, that's pretty much every Mets starting pitcher's bugaboo, right? At this point, where they just walk guys. But he struck out 8. His fastball was very good. His sweeper, his curveball was very good. He was in control. He was in command. He got in and out of a couple of jams, including that great behind the back play for the double play on a ground ball by Julio Rodriguez. I think that was in the top of the third or the top of the fourth. He looked for a guy making his debut. For a guy making his debut in the middle of a playoff push, this was not an easy situation for Nolan McLean, and it won't be easy for Brandon Sproat if he gets called up either. Middle of August, going into late August, but we're about to get to September. September's on the way, and we're calling up the Mets are calling up these guys because you're not getting anything out of Frankie Montez, and neither of your starting pitchers really are in a groove right now. You need something. So you call up McLean and you say, well, in the middle of a playoff push, in the middle of a wild card race slash in the middle of a wild card race and or division race, or both and both, and say, hey, against a good baseball team like the Seattle Mariners, with a National League MVP candidate in their lineup and Cal Riley, and a five-tool player like Julio Rodriguez in there, and another good player like Randy Rosarina in there, and another good player like Eugenio Suarez in there, and Naylor, and you say, good luck. And he went out and he excelled. He was up for the challenge. You give him, did it help that he was at home? Yeah, probably. But but he went out there and he pitched very, very well. And he gave, I think, the Mets, or at least what they hope, is a spark of energy and a spark of optimism to help this starting rotation out. But again, it's a lot to ask for a guy just getting called up in a playoff push. So it's a lot to ask, but hopefully his performance can give the Mets a little bit of a juice here and give the starting rotation a little bit of a juice. But overall, for him, he was very impressive. And I'm glad he got the win. The Mets won the game 3-1. I'm glad he got the win because boy, we've seen it a bunch of times where a Mets pitcher, young pitcher, comes up and he dominates and he pitches great, and but the Mets can't score a run for him, right? The Mets only must have a couple of runs for him, 3 runs, but but McLean gave him five. They got 3 runs. Lindor, Alonso, and Soto led the way with scoring. Lindor got an RBI double. Soto got a sacrifice fly RBI. P. Alonso got an RBI double. And that was all the score the Mets needed. And the Mets bullpen took over after he went 5 and a third. Excuse me. He went 5 and a third. He was taken out with an out, with one out in the top of the sixth. So he got to the sixth inning, Nolan McLean. And they brought in Gregory Soto. He pitched the remainder of the sixth, did a good job. He got 3 outs in the seventh. And then, in a move that I didn't agree with, because they had a game the next day, in a rubber game, if they would have win, Carlos Mendoza put in Edwin Diaz for a 6-out save. Now, this was something he should have done a couple of times over the past week, in my opinion, especially on Sunday against the Milwaukee Brewers. Last weekend against the previous weekend, against or in Milwaukee, I should just say, when they needed a win to try to avoid a sweep, and I think avoid losing what was that, their sixth in a row, whatever it was. I would have put in Edwin Diaz for a 6-out save there, especially with an off day the next day. But Mendoza didn't do that. Here on a Saturday game, with a game the next day where they have to travel to Williamsport for the Little League Classic, with a day off on Monday, by the way, here was the moment he decided to throw Diaz for a 6-out save. So I didn't agree with it, but for the Mets on this day, it ended up it worked out. Diaz got 6 outs. Well, 5 outs, a home run, and then a 6-out. 4 outs, a home run, and then the next 2 outs. I should say, gave up a home run, a solo home run in the ninth inning to Eugenio Suarez. But overall, he got the 6 outs, and the Mets won the game. And Nolan McLean got his first win of the season, for his first career Major League MLB win. I believe he becomes the first Met since Matt Harvey to throw 8 strikeouts at home in his home debut and get a win. So I believe he was the first one since Matt Harvey. Oh no, and he was the first one since Steven Matz to win his debut start. He's the first Mets rookie to throw 8 strikeouts at home in his home debut and get his first win since Matt Harvey. And he's the first Mets rookie pitcher to get a win in their debut since Steven Matz in 2015, that memorable game that year where I think he had 3 or 4 RBIs. He pitched great. He was great at the plate. His grandpa, his whole family. That was such a memorable day. And Steven Matz is from right here on Long Island, so that was a especially cool moment for around here too. But for Nolan McLean, this was a very good outing. You come away very impressed with him. It was one start, and I don't want to say he's going to be the thing that turns this thing around, because it's a lot, but you just hope he can at least go out there and give you some quality outings and just give you an opportunity to win some games and just keep getting better, as the starts go on. Because look, he's not going to be perfect. look, the Mets have two series with the Phillies coming up, including one that's a 4 game series. He might be pitching in one of those. He might be pitching in one of those. You know, again, it's tough. So, but he just has to play his game, pitch his game, do his best, and just try to give the Mets something out of the starting rotation. But you love his stuff, and and you just want him to you just want him to go out there and give you some guys. But he's got a high potential, and you look at the Mets overall. We're talking about the Mets starting pitching. We've asked and wondered, or some have asked and wondered why the Mets haven't gone out and acquired a pitcher. I think one of the key reasons is not only just because the market itself isn't particularly great, but the Mets have arms, man. You have Nolan McLean, you have Brandon Sproat, you have Jonah Tong, who just recently got called up to AAA, so he's on the way up, and Christian Scott, who they called up last year and had some good games for them. He's just going to come off. He's going to be back healthy next year off Tommy John surgery. So, you know, so the Mets are going to have some young arms next coming up within the next. I mean, next year, Nolan McLean, Brandon Sproat, and Jonah Tong could all be in the rotation. I don't think Jonah Tong will start the season in the rotation, because I think they want to see more out of him in AAA. But Brandon Sproat, he could certainly either make his way into the rotation this year, or he could pitch his way into the rotation early next year, even by opening day if he's lucky. There's the pop. All three of them could be in the rotation. All three of them, Tong and Sproat and McLean, Tong, Sproat, McLean, all three of them could be in the rotation next year. So, and what does that leave guys like Peterson, Manaea, Senga? Who knows? But I mean, or Clay Holmes. I mean, Holmes is, and Montez both are on 2-year contracts. I assume Holmes will probably get moved to the bullpen, and Frankie Montez, I don't think will be back at this point next year. I'd be surprised if Montez is back for the Mets next year. But the Mets have a decent amount of young for the first time since the Harvey, DeGrom, Syndergaard, Matz class, Wheeler class. Mets, all those group of guys, the Mets have a pretty good batch of pitchers coming out, or at least what you hope is a pretty good batch of pitchers coming out from AAA. So, or coming from the minor leagues. So, and McLean hopefully is that first spark, that first wave of guys, and Sproat and Tong and Christian Scott coming back, But McLean for his first start, his debut, he looked good, played some good defense, pitched great, looked in control. Like I said, his fastball, sweeper, curveball was very good. I think there were a couple times maybe Randy Rosarina. He pitched really well against those guys, but you like what you see out of McLean. But a good job by the Mets to get a win. And the bullpen was able to win the game there and get McLean a win. On to Sunday, in Williamsport, the Little League Classic, Clay Holmes actually pitched pretty good. If he would have gone 6 innings if Francisco Lindor didn't make that error at the top of the fourth. In the top of the fourth. He probably would have gone 6 because he was cruising. But Lindor made the error, continued the inning, 1 run came in to score. But Holmes still gave you 5 innings. I believe this was Holmes' second good start in like the last 3. So hopefully, again, you're not asking for a lot. You're not asking, you're not asking a lot of Clay Holmes. Again, he's the 4th pitcher. He's the fourth starter in the rotation, but he gave you 5, struck out 4. They didn't rule that Lindor play an error, but honestly, they probably should have. So that would have been an unearned run for him. But Holmes pitched fine. He pitched fine, and the offense really led the way. 7 runs, 14 hits. You had a nice day from Mark Vientos. Geez, he gets into the lineup and he hits a 3-run homer. Big key 3-run homer. Lindor has another very good day at the plate. He has a 3-hit performance. Juan Soto walked 3 times, and that was really cool. He did the Soto shuffle because the kids in the back, the Little League kids, were chanting for the Soto shuffle, and he does the Soto shuffle, and the fans and the kids popped. I thought that was, they cheered really loud for it. I thought that was such a really cool moment. Alonso walked and got a hit. McNeil got a couple hits. Alvarez got an RBI single. We'll talk a little bit more about him after this game. He had a three-hit performance. Francisco Alvarez, Beatty got an RBI. Alvarez got an RBI. Vientos had a big four RBI day, one with including his three-run homer. So offense carried the offense. Holmes did just enough. He pitched well enough. Again, he probably could have gone deeper, maybe into the sixth if Lindor's error didn't happen. And in the fourth inning, and that prelude the inning, and who knows, Holmes could have given them six, I think. But he pitched well enough. He pitched decently. He pitched good. Second time in as many outings, I think. Holmes had a decent. Holmes had a good day. Bullpen, not the best in this on this day. Helsley got in and out. Helsley got in trouble. Got out of it in the eighth. That was with two outs and nobody on. Got into some trouble, but then got out of it. Tyler Rogers got into some trouble in the ninth, but got out of it. Reed Garrett gave up a couple of runs in the seventh inning on a two-run homer by Cal Riley. But the Mets offense scored 7 runs, and 14 hits. So look, all you got to do is get the next several outs to win the game. You know, the Mets offense gave you 7 runs and 14 hits. So you guys as a bullpen just got to. This game was on you. You know, get to the ninth, get the 3 outs, and win the game. And that's what they did. You know, you would have liked maybe a little more cleaner innings, but they were able to get the win. Holmes, 5 innings, 5 hits, a run, a walk, 4 strikeouts. Brooks Raley, an inning, a walk, a strikeout, a hit. Reed Garrett, an inning, 2 hits, 2 earned runs on the home run by Cal Riley. Ryan Helsley, a walk with 2 strikeouts. Tyler Rogers gave up 2 hits in the ninth inning. So again, not a clean performance by the bullpen after getting a 7-1 lead, but they got the remaining outs. So, and the Mets end up winning the game. But they win the game. Offense has a great performance. 7-3. Holmes is decent. Vientos has a big day. Alvarez has a good day. Lindor has another great day. And the Mets, for the first time in a few weeks, I think for the first time since the series against for the first time since they swept the Giants. Yeah, for the first time since they swept the Giants when they're in the middle of that 7-game winning streak. For the first time since then, the Mets won a series. And again, it's not just for the first time since then. It's just not many series wins have come from the Mets over the past 2 months. Aside from that 7-game winning streak, they beat the Royals in a series. They beat before the All-Star break. They beat the Yankees, of course, at Citi Field. They beat the Brewers at Citi Field at 2 out of 3. There hasn't been many. They've now won this series against Seattle. It hasn't, this was, of course, in the middle of that 7-game. This is, of course, there is that 7-game winning streak that they had. But there really hasn't been many series wins to count since June 12, 13, 14, since really this streak of playing bad baseball for the past 2 months really started. And that's what happens when you've been 18-34 in your last many games. So what happens when you're now 5 back of the division. You're only a game and a half or a half game up on the wild card. So a few things to talk about from this series and over the past week, and a big thing to talk about coming when this game. We haven't had any updates yet. I'm sure we'll get an update tomorrow, but Francisco Alvarez, man, you feel for him. He slid last night. He was extending for a double on a base hit. His third hit of the day. Last night, he was riding to second, and it looked like he kind of got a bit of a bad slide. It wasn't a pretty slide, but he was sliding head first, and his right thumb, again with the thumbs, for him. You feel for him. His thumb got jammed right on the base. His thumb, and he stayed in the game to run, but you kind of had a feeling they were going to take him out after that, which is what they did. And Luis Torrens played the rest of the game. This was in the bottom of the seventh, I believe, when he got hurt. And then top of the eighth, Torrens came in. He's going to get an MRI today. We don't know. Again, we don't know anything. I'm sure we'll know tomorrow before the game against the Nationals. But if Francisco Alvarez is out for an extended period of time, boy, that's a big loss, because he is hit really, really well. His defense may still be up and down, but he has come back from the minor leagues, and this is where you feel so bad for him because he has worked so hard. He's worked his tail off when they sent him down, working on everything, getting his swing right, going back to pulling the ball, just making contact, hitting more home runs, hitting more for power, and going to the minor leagues, working on all those things, coming back and performing and hitting and being one of the better hitters the Mets have had since he came back from the minors. For him to get hurt again, and if he was to go back on the IL, that would be such a big loss. And it's no offense to Luis Torrens, but we've seen Luis Torrens as a starting catcher, everyday catcher, and he's just not that. It's no offense to him. I like Torrens. He's a good dude, good clubhouse guy. He's a good veteran depth guy as a catcher, but he's not an everyday catcher. Alvarez and his talent is an everyday catcher, and he has hit that way since he came back from his being sent down. You were proud of him. You were happy for him. He looked happy to be contributing. And for this injury to happen, boy, it's just tough luck for him. It is just ridiculously tough luck for him, for the Mets as well, but really for him. Because over the past couple of years, he's had to fight and battle through injuries, being sent down. I mean, this is now what, the third injury, I think, over the past 2 years, I think. This is what, like the second or this is what, the third or fourth, I think, injury. I think this is the fourth. So over the last 2 years now, you know. So, and he already had the thing with his thumb last year. So, and he got hurt before this season. Before this season started, he got hurt, came back, struggled, got sent down, came back, hit, and now he's hurt again. And this time it's the right thumb. So it's a tough break for him. It's a tough break for the Mets. You just hope that his MRI comes back good, and you hope he's all right because this lineup needs him. This lineup really, really needs him. So, and he's hit really well. I don't know if the Mets can have Luis Torrens batting every day at this point. It's no offense to him. He's a decent, fine backup veteran catcher, but he's not an everyday guy. He's just, it's just how it is. And now there's a possibility that the Mets, during a critical stretch, you're only a game and a half on the wild card, 5 games back in the division. You got series with the Braves and Phillies and Nationals this week coming up. And Texas Rangers are also coming up as well. And one of your better hitters recently is now might be out. But again, we don't know. We won't know until tomorrow. But if he's out, if he's back on the injured list, boy, that is really tough. Really tough. And it stinks. And you feel bad for him. You really do. Because he's fought his way back and battled his way back through a lot of adversity over the past 2 years. And it looked like just now he was really finding his groove again, what we saw 2 years ago in his rookie year in 2023. And for this setback to happen off a slide, it just, again, you feel for him. But hopefully the MRI comes out good today. Hopefully he's misses a game or two or so. Hopefully the injury isn't that bad, but the Mets really need him. They really do. They need him in that lineup. And so you hope for the best, and you hope for the best for him because it's just a tough break for him. It really is. It just seems like every time he takes a step up, every time he takes a step forward, there's a step back. Step forward, step back, for Alvarez. It just seems like that's been the case for him over the past 2 years now. And it just, again, it stinks because he's got such a high potential. You see it. You've seen it recently over the past month or so since he's been back from his stint back in the minor leagues. So we'll see what his injury is tomorrow, I'm sure, or later today, probably tomorrow before the game. So, there was the Alvarez injury that came out of it. But Francisco Lindor, the other Francisco, was today named once again for the 5th time this season was named National League Player of the Week, and certainly deservingly so because Francisco Lindor has been red hot as of late over the last week, and that is probably the biggest thing for the New York Mets as we get to these last 39 or so games of the season with the Mets in the middle of either trying to win the division we're trying to get a wild card. As we know, over the past few years, over the last 3 or so years, the Mets go as Francisco Lindor goes. Okay, Pete Alonso is great, and he can carry the Mets. Juan Soto is great, and he can carry the Mets. But we have seen over the last 3 years, the Mets go as Francisco Lindor goes. The stats say it this year. When Francisco Lindor is playing and hitting well, the Mets win. When he's not, they don't. It's just that simple. So, so we can talk about all the other players. We can talk about the starting pitching or the bullpen or anybody else in the lineup, but Francisco Lindor is the head driver of the train. He's the driver. He's the driver. He's driving the train. The train goes as he goes. And Francisco Lindor over the last week was 14 of 25, 3 homers, 7 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, and six extra base hits. And he had a very big series against the Seattle Mariners. And funny enough, this all started with a bunt single against Atlanta because he was like 0 for 20 something, and then he hits a bunt single, and ever since then he's been hot. So I guess every little hit counts, even if it's a bunt single. But if Francisco Lindor can continue this throughout the next month, then the Mets will be in the playoffs. How do I know? Because I saw it in 2022. How do I know? I saw it last year. How do we know? Well, when the Mets are playing, how do I know? How do I know? How do I know? Because when the Mets are playing really good baseball this year, through the first 2.5 months, and they were 21 games over 500, and 5.5 up in the division, 5.5 up in the division. You know who was doing really well and leading it? Francisco Lindor. Look at the stats. Look at the numbers. Yeah, the starting pitching, they were great too, but Francisco Lindor too. Francisco Lindor especially. Mr. Lindor. He was hitting like an MVP again. But then he broke his toe and he's been struggling or at least up and down ever since. But if he's getting healthy and he can take this past week and play the way we know he's capable of playing as and hit the way he's capable of hitting as, and lead the pack and do what he did in 2022 or last year and earlier this season, then the Mets will be in the playoffs. Simple as that. Simple as that. So it's good to see Lindor hopefully get going again. Hopefully he's getting hot. Hopefully he is. Hopefully he's getting hot and hopefully he's getting on a roll. So usually that's good. That's good for the Mets. So Juan Soto also got 20 stolen bases this season. It's been such a I want to talk just a little bit about Soto here. He's had such a very I feel like if his numbers weren't with runners on scoring position, runners on base was not as tough as they were, I think a lot of people would be saying he's having a great year. I'm not saying MVP candidate, but I definitely think people would look at his year more highly because he's got 30 homers. His OPS is well over 800. His OPS is great. He's leading the league in walks. He's got 20 stolen bases. His wins above replacement is really good. If he was just hitting better with runners in scoring position and runners on base, I think people would not be looking at his season the way they are, which they say, oh yeah, it's fine, but not Soto-like. You know what I mean? I feel like, because like he's done a good job this year. It's the runners on base. It's the runners in scoring position. But he's not the only one. Lindor has had his struggles with runners in scoring position this year. Brandon Nimmo has, and Jeff McNeil has, and Alvarez and Vientos. Pretty much everyone except Starling Marte and Pete Alonso, of course. Alonso especially. He's been great running scoring position overall. But Juan Soto got his 20th stolen base last night. He's now has 30 homers and 20 stolen bases this year. He has 30 homers and 20 stolen bases. How many extra base hits does Juan Soto have this year? Let's take a look. That I actually don't know. How many extra base hits does he have this year? Or excuse me, doubles, I mean. How many doubles does Juan Soto have this year? So how many doubles does Juan Soto have this year? Let's see. Juan Soto has 16 doubles this year. So so he's gonna have a 20-20-20 season. 20 homers, 20 stolen bases, you know, and 20 doubles. He's gonna have a 20-20-20 season. If he gets 10 or if he gets another 10 stolen bases, if he does, because again he gets on base a lot, and he has 20 already, and he has 20, and we got another month to go. That's 30 homers and 30 stolen bases. He's probably not going to get to 30 doubles this year with 16. He would have to get really, really, really hot. And if he gets really, 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 really hot, then boy, that would be a lot of fun to see him and Lindor really, 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 really hot and during this stretch. But for all intents and purposes, Juan Soto and again, I talk about this because they were talking about it a lot too, especially on the ESPN broadcast last night. People, some guys in WFAN were talking about it as well over the past couple of days. But he's had a good season. Let me say this. He is certainly, because I still see people comparing his season to, because that's what Met fans do. We always got to look at someone's first year, compare it to Beltran, right? 2005 Carlos Beltran. Francisco Lindor got a lot, and now Lindor has entered that fray. But it's 2005 Carlos Beltran, and now 2021 Francisco Lindor. Look at the numbers. Juan Soto's 2025 is a lot better than Beltran's in 05 and a lot better than Lindor's in 2021. Go look at the numbers. They are. Soto to me has had a good season, a pretty darn good season. But if I do think, yes, if his numbers of run scoring position were better, we would look at it and say, oh, he's having a great year. But unfortunately, they're not. They're not. The batting average run scoring position for him is not very good. I don't even think he has a three. I don't even think he has a 3-run homer this season. So so there are those things with him this year, and that has gained this perception that he's not having a particularly Soto-esque season, and some might say a disappointing season his first year with the Mets for the money that the Mets have paid him. But overall, when you look at the numbers, he still had a pretty good year. You just want the numbers of running score position to be better. That's all. But still, 30 homers and 20 stolen bases. 20 stolen bases. That's pretty good. Very good. It's a career high for him. Very good to go along with 30 homers and 20 doubles. Or over 20 doubles by the end of the season, when the season's done. And by all intents and purposes, and he'll get at least I think at least 90 something RBIs. I think when the season is over, he'll have about 90. But certainly you could argue that if he was better run scoring position, it would be over 100, well over 100. Same thing that Pete has. Pete has 100 right now, or over 100. So I just wanted to talk a little about that because they talked about Soto yesterday on the broadcast, and it was a topic of discussion. But to go with it, but as they were talking about that, he got his 20th stolen base last night, and he got on base 3 times with 3 walks. So, but the Mets do need Soto to get really hot. They do. He needs to join the fray with Lindor and Alonso. But Soto has hit really well. I say that, and yet Soto has hit really well recently. Before yesterday, he was on, I think, a 10 or so game hitting streak, but that got broken but even then, yesterday he walked 3 times. He's on another on base streak, so he is hitting really well recently. So that's good. So it's just been that kind of year for him. But I do think if Soto really, really hits, as we get to September, then I think people look at the season very differently for him. Instead of saying, oh, it was a good year for him, but not a great year, they'll say, oh, wow, yeah, he carried this team. Wow, what a year. So, oh, man, Juan Soto, that's Juan Soto. That's Juan Soto, man. That's Juan Soto. That's why you give him all that money. But Soto obviously will be, but Soto, I just want to talk about that. I want to talk about Lindor, Alvarez's injury, of course. Um, so to kind of to time put a bow on the on this weekend series for the Mets. Uh, to preview now this upcoming week series. Don't sleep on it, Mets. Now you got to now you got to follow up the series against the Mariners. Now you got to go out there this weekend and win. Don't sleep on the Nationals on the road. It's a road series, division rival. Nationals have nothing to play for. You know, the last time you were in Washington, they played you tough and split a 4-game series earlier in the year. Even had a big comeback against you. Don't sleep on them. As a matter of fact, let me double check to make sure. As a matter of fact, the Washington Nationals played the Philadelphia Phillies last week, and the Nationals, well, they went out there against Philadelphia. They went out there against Philadelphia. Excuse me for a second. They went out there against Philadelphia and played them tough. They played them tough and split a 4-game series against them. And almost won on Sunday. Almost came back and won on Sunday. So they had a 4-game series with the Phillies over the weekend, and they split them. And almost came back and won on Sunday against the Phillies. So don't sleep on the Nationals. Don't sleep on the Mets. You got just a little bit of positives back now after the last 2 wins, and including Nolan McLean's big start. So now your job this weekend in a 3-game series in Washington, in DC, before you go on the road to face the Braves again, is to go out there and beat them. Find a way to win. Just win. It doesn't matter if you win the game 9-0 or 1-0. Win the game. So this is a big series for the Mets. You can't sleep on the Nationals this weekend, because the Nationals certainly are not ones to sleep on, because they just played the Phillies tough and almost beat them 3 out of 4. So on Tuesday, tomorrow night, David Pearson will take the mound as he looks to bounce back from a rough outing. He'll face Cole Irvin of the Nationals. Then on Wednesday, Kodai Senga will pitch again. He starts, and he's coming off a good outing in his last outing. He's coming off a good outing. He'll face Brad Lord on Wednesday, and then Thursday afternoon, 4 o'clock, Sean Manaea will take the mound again against Nationals ace Mackenzie Gore. Big series. Peterson needs to go out and have a bounce back. Senga needs to go out there and continue off his good start from his good start from before. Sean Manaea has to give you something. He has to give you something. He's had a lot of strikeouts, but also a lot of home runs, and he's not going deep. He needs to give you something here. He needs to pitch better here. And then on Friday, the Mets go back to Atlanta to face the Braves, and that's where Nolan McLean's more than likely going to start again. So not easy for this kid. First, you face the Seattle Mariners in your first start, and then your second start, you got to go to Atlanta and face the Braves. So again, they're throwing him in there. So it's tough, but that's the Braves series over the weekend. The National Series is where the Mets have to focus on. They got to win this series. You got to. But Washington will be no picnic. They will be no picnic. They just showed you over the weekend that they will be no picnic. So the Mets have to go in there, take it a game at a time, 1 inning at a time, and try to find a way to win a series. Heck, if you can sweep them, even better. But I won't say go for a sweep, because the Mets have not shown me they can sweep anybody right now. They just have. If you could sweep them, and great. But just try to go out there and win 2 out of 3. And then when you play Atlanta, please win the series. We'll talk more about the Braves series on Thursday, but I just wanted to say that quickly. Please win the series. Please. Oh, actually, you'll be facing Ronald Acuna this time, so good luck with that. But the Mets need to win this series in Washington. Don't sleep on them. Don't sleep on them. You just came off a good series win against a good team in Seattle. You had that great outing from McLean on Saturday. Don't go into Washington and sleepwalk your way through this series. Don't give the Nationals an inch. Go in there, know what's at stake, know what you got to know that you got to win, and every game from right now is a must win for you. You got to go in there ready to play. You got to go in there. You got to go in there ready to play. Play your best and don't sleepwalk, because if you do, you will lose this series, and people will go right back to saying, "Well, you stink." So, as the Mets enter today's, of course, they have a day off today. The Mets are 5 games back of the Phillies in the division. For the division, the Reds, they are a game and a half still up on the Reds. I don't believe the Reds or Phillies played tonight. Actually, the Phillies do play tonight. The Phillies actually play the Seattle Mariners at home against the Phillies, against the Mariners. The Mariners actually don't have a starter. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm looking at tomorrow night. I apologize. I'm looking at tomorrow night. But the Phillies and Mariners do play tonight. I was looking at Tuesday night, but the Phillies and Mariners do play tonight at 6:45. So for all Met fans, we'll watch that game. Uh, Gilbert goes on the mound for the Mariners against Ranger Suarez of the Phillies. So I believe the Reds, do they play tonight? Yes, they do. They're at Los Angeles to play the Angels. They're at Anaheim to play the Angels. Los Angeles. They're at Anaheim to play the Angels. They're still the Anaheim Angels to me. So the Reds this week play the Angels. They play the Angels tonight at 9:38. Pitching matchup for that game. Cincinnati Reds are throwing in Brady Singer against the Angels, and the Angels will throw Victor Menderos on the mound. Looks like they're throwing a bullpen game. Looks like the Angels are throwing a bullpen game, actually. So, but Reds are at the Angels this week, and the Phillies are playing the Mariners at home. So obviously, for Met fans, you watch tonight. You root for the Angels. You root for the Mariners. Hopefully, by the time the Mets play hopefully when the Mets take the field tomorrow night in Washington, they are 4.5 behind the Phillies and 2 games up on the Reds. But at the end of the day, bottom line, gotta win your games. It's all about the Mets. You gotta win your games. You control your own destiny. You either continue to spiral and lose, or you build up some of the positive momentums you've built up over the weekend, and you continue it, and you start winning some games. Win some games. For the Mets, it's all about winning games. Don't worry about the Phillies. Don't worry about the Reds or anybody else. You just got to be you and play your game and win some games. Pitch better, hit better, play better defense, manage better, because they are so much better than what they've shown over the past 2 months. So it was good to see them get a series win. But like I said last week, I'm still not fully in, even if they would have won this series against the Mariners. I still feel that loss against the Braves, they were up, they have 6-0, and they just completely fell apart and blew it. I still feel that was just a loss. I was like, I don't know how the Mets come back from that. It just felt like didn't just feel like a bad loss. It felt like a demoralizing loss. The kind of loss that I don't know how you rebound from that. It felt like the season was over. It felt like that was the loss that you point to and say, yeah, that was the day where the season just was on right there. And the Mets were just done. So I still feel that way about that loss. And I still feel that way about after that game. And I said last week during the show that even if the Mets did beat the Mariners in the series, that I still would feel that I still wasn't buying in. And I would still feel that this team probably wasn't going to make it to October, but they have a chance to still right the ship and win some games. And it starts tomorrow night in DC. Got to win some games. So, but that'll be it for this edition of MazzaOnMets. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. Thank you guys very much for listening. Mazza Ravens and Mazza Jets will be coming up soon this week. We'll talk about the Ravens. Preseason football, 2 weeks have now passed for preseason football. They are 2-0 in the preseason, like the Ravens always are. The Ravens always win the preseason. They always win the preseason. But they're now 2-0 in preseason action. The Jets are now 1-1. in preseason action. There's only a week and a half. There's only we're on the last week of preseason. The next week is nothing, and then week one is here. So 2 weeks, 2 weeks from now, we're in the last week of the preseason, and 2 weeks from now, a couple weeks from now, week one will be here. The Jets will take the field of MetLife against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Ravens will go back to Buffalo to play the Buffalo Bills. But stay tuned for MazzaOn Ravens and MazzaOn Jets this week to talk about the preseason. Obviously, with the Ravens, we have to talk about some things with them. They've made a decision with kicker, and with the Jets, we'll be talking about their offensive performance so far over the first couple preseason games. But that'll be it for MazzaOnMets today. Thank you guys very much for tuning in and listening. I appreciate it. Give this video a like, share, and subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. Have you all have a great day. And let's go Mets.